Today we're looking at how sentence length impacts writing. And we're going to start by checking out a few examples. So let's look at this piece that uses primarily long sentences. The alleys stretched before them like the maw of a dragon. Broken bricks gnawed on the cloth and skin that dared to brush against the walls, while trash, the remnants of former travelers, caught the feet and slowed progress to nearly a crawl. Now, this uses quite a few long sentences, and it even gets borderline run on for the last one. But let's look at how that affects how it reads. For instance, one thing that you might notice when you're using primarily long sentences is that the impact is a slow, thoughtful piece. You have to read it slow, and you have to think a little bit deeper and a little bit harder because the structure is more complex and there's a lot going on. But that can be really useful because it can create a sense of relaxation or a nice flow, or you can even use it to make time seem as if it's dragging. Overall though, these long sentences are used primarily to create descriptions and for in-depth explanations. So what about short sentences? If long sentences are used for those descriptions and deep thoughts, short sentences are going to be kind of the opposite. Here's an example. A shot rang out. Davis ducked. Maddie dove behind the dumpster. What's the effect of these short sentences? Well, in short sentences, you're going to have quick and dramatic writing. It moves fast. It creates a punchy, sort of choppy rhythm, which can come across as both frantic and fast, and it can then be a little bit off-putting. So watch how often you use short sentences in a row, unless, of course, that's the effect that you want to go for. In fact, it's best used when you're trying to get across a sense of action or speed, if you're using pretty much primarily short sentences. Now, the question I get a lot then is, do I only use one or the other? No. Any sort of structure that's used repeatedly gets dry and old. So what you should do is use a thoughtful mix. Now you can see here that we have an example from Gary Provost, who's primarily known for this piece, but also for some other writing advice. He explores how the lengths of sentences can affect writing in a piece itself. So let's listen. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what's happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length, and sometimes when I'm certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important. So write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ear. Don't just write words. Write music. It's a beautifully written piece, and it actually has fantastic advice in it. So let's analyze some of what he's doing so that we can mimic that ourselves. First off, one of the biggest things that he does is he builds his sentence length. Look at that middle paragraph. He tends to go from short to long pretty much repeatedly, where each one builds up this longer length. What that does is it actually makes suspense. So I recommend use that same sort of build. Take a short sentence, make your next one slightly longer, and after that slightly longer still, before you start to back away like he does in the final paragraph. Another thing that he does quite well is he uses short sentences in their most effective way. While short sentences read fast, they also are useful for one other thing. Short sentences create emphasis. You should put your key points in the shortest sentences. So if you see the ones highlighted there in yellow, now listen, music, and write music, those are really his key ideas. He wants you to listen at this point. He wants you to understand that this is what makes music. So he puts them in short sentences. In contrast, the longer portions are the portions that are poetic. It uses a lot of figurative language, and it grows and deepens a thought that's already there. So it takes this idea of the music, of the writing, singing, and it adds that depth and description in a beautiful, poetic way. So that's how you can mimic it. Watch that your long sentences are for explanation, are for description and poetry, and watch that your short sentences contain key ideas or quick actions. And we can actually see this in those last two examples. For instance, the waves crashed, the moon shone brightly, all else was silent on the deserted beach. From the distance came the sound of thunder rolling and growing with each passing minute. Cassius waited. See how the mix here, while it does contain primarily short sentences, slowly grows with each sentence until by the fourth sentence, from the distance, we have a fairly long sentence. This makes sense because, for one, it crescendos the overall build of the writing, but two, the fourth sentence contains a very vivid description of sound. And it's also nice that the fourth sentence is long because in that sentence, we even talk about the sound of thunder growing, which means it kind of makes sense that the sentence itself should have grown longer than the previous ones. So it's an effective use of length there. Ending with that very short sentence also contrasts it and gives this sense of suspense, a short piece that we should pay attention to. Cassius waited. We know that's important, even if we don't know why yet. In contrast, we have our next piece, which uses primarily long sentences. Let's pay attention to what the short sentence in there does. Autumn came without special invitation, coloring the trees in orange and yellow and red. It whispered the cold in our ears and hid the warm sun rays from our eyes. Yet we did not despair. Even when its winds crept through the cracks in our homes and stole the heat of the furnace, we kept moving. Darkness could not halt our progress in the fields. It could only slow it down. Here, that short sentence, yet we could not despair, again does several things. First off, it gives us a bit of a break. If you have several long sentences, they get kind of bulky and hard to deal with. So you're giving your reader a break. Second, yet we did not despair is the key point in this. That's the thing that we should realize. With all of this cold, with all of these difficulties, they did not despair. So it's emphasized using a short sentence. This is all well and good to know the effects of length, but it is even better when you practice it yourself. So take some time to go through and do some descriptive writing. There is a worksheet that you guys can use posted on Classroom, and that will be due tomorrow.